The morning my daughter replaced the armchair, I said nothing. I watched from the doorway as two men carried it out. The green one with the worn armrest where my wife used to rest her hand while we watched the evening news. They brought in something beige and ergonomic, the kind of chair that looks like it belongs in a waiting room. Karen smiled and said it would be easier on my back. I thanked her. I sat in it that evening. It felt like sitting in someone else's life. My name is Walter Hughes. I am 84 years old. I am a retired electrician. For 41 years I worked with my hands, rewiring factories, running conduit through walls that shook in the Ohio winters, climbing into crawl spaces when my knees still allowed it. I built this house on Sycamore Lane with those same hands. Poured the back porch myself on a July weekend in 1987. Dorothy brought me lemonade and complained I was taking too long. I told her it had to be done right. She laughed. That porch has never cracked. Dorothy passed 14 months ago. Pneumonia, they said, though I think grief played its part. She had been slowing down since her sister died the year before. I buried her under the elm in the backyard, next to the garden she tended for 30 years. I sat by that window for a long time after. I didn't sell the house. I didn't move. I made coffee the way she taught me, too strong and too hot, and I kept living. That is when my children began to notice me, or began to notice what I represented. Karen is 56. She teaches high school history and has her mother's eyes and her mother's stubbornness, though she uses it differently. My son David is 52. He sells commercial real estate in Columbus and drives a truck that costs more than my first 3 cars combined. They had always been present, birthdays, holidays. But after Dorothy died, the visits intensified. Weekends, then midweeks, then Karen took a key. I want to be honest with you. At first it moved me. Grief is isolating. The house is large for one person. Having them around softened the silence. Karen cooked. David fixed things that didn't need fixing and loudly announced each repair as if he were presenting evidence of my decline. The coffee maker, the porch light, the latch on the back gate. I let him. I said thank you. I meant it. But there is a difference between care and appropriation, and it took me too long to see which one was happening. If you are watching this and you have ever felt like a stranger in your own home, like the space around you is being quietly disassembled while everyone smiles, then you already understand something that took me months to name. Stay with me, because what I did next changed everything. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. You would be surprised how many people are living this exact story right now. The tools disappeared first. I noticed it on a Tuesday in October when I went to the garage to find my voltage tester. The workbench had been reorganized, bins relabeled, a section cleared entirely. When I asked David, he said he had put the dangerous stuff in storage, his storage, at his house, because I had been leaving things plugged in. I had not been leaving things plugged in. I am an electrician. I have spent my life preventing exactly the kind of carelessness he was accusing me of. But I did not argue. I noted it. I filed it away. Then the bedroom. Karen decided the throw rug near the bed was a fall hazard. She replaced it while I was at my doctor's appointment. She also moved the nightstand to the other side, which was Dorothy's side, the side I had not touched since January. I came home and stood in the doorway, looking at a room that had been quietly edited. I sat on the bed and put my hand where the nightstand used to be. Empty floor. I told myself it was practical. I told myself she meant well, but there is a kind of grief that comes not from loss but from erasure, and I was beginning to know it intimately. They began talking about me differently, not to me, around me. sentences that trailed off when I entered the room, phone calls in the kitchen that stopped when I came for water. David started repeating things, not because I hadn't heard, but because he assumed I hadn't understood. He would explain the television remote to me, the remote I had been using for 6 years. I would nod. I would wait. I would think about voltage and load capacity and the patience required to trace a fault through 40 feet of conduit in the dark. An electrician learns early that the most dangerous moment is not when the power is obviously on. It is when someone assumes it is off. I was not confused. I was not frail in the ways they needed me to be. My hands shake, a tremor that started 3 years ago and means nothing more than age. My back limits me. I walk slowly, but my mind, the part that matters, was running clean. I saw everything. I cataloged everything. I simply had not yet decided what to do with what I was seeing. The night I found out changed that. It was a Wednesday in November. Karen had stayed for dinner. David drove up after, said he had been in the area. They sent me to lie down early. Karen said I looked tired, which meant she wanted me out of the room. I went upstairs. I did not lie down. I sat in the chair by the window, the new beige chair they had moved up there after replacing the one downstairs. The window faces the living room roof, and the vent for the heating system runs along that wall. I have known since 1989 that sound carries through that vent in a particular way. I heard my name. I heard the house. I heard the words assessed value and 60 days, and he won't understand the paperwork anyway. I heard Karen say she had already spoken to someone at Meadowbrook, that is the assisted living facility on Route 9, and that they had availability in the spring. I heard David say the market was good and that waiting didn't make sense. I heard my daughter say, quietly but clearly, that the house was too big for one person and that I would be safer somewhere with supervision. Safer, somewhere with supervision. I sat in that chair for a long time after the voices stopped. I listened to them leave. I listened to the car pull away. I looked out at the elm tree in the backyard, at the dark shape of Dorothy's garden, at the porch I had poured myself on a July weekend 37 years ago. And something in me became very still. Not broken, not panicked. Still. I had spent months absorbing. Now I would begin to act. I did not confront them. That is the first thing you need to understand. Confrontation would have confirmed every assumption they had already made, that I was reactive, emotional, difficult to manage. Instead, I became invisible to them in a different way. They thought I was fading. I let them think that. While they planned, I moved. I called Raymond Kowalski the next morning. Ray and I worked together at Midstate Electric for 11 years. He retired to become a paralegal, then went back to school at 55 and finished as a property attorney. He is 78 now, and sharp as a circuit breaker in cold weather. I told him what I had heard. He was quiet for a moment, then he said, "Walter, bring me everything you have." I spent 3 days going through files. The deed, which had always been in my name alone. The mortgage, paid off in 2004. The property tax records. My will, which I had not reviewed since Dorothy's passing and which required immediate attention. Every document I owned, organized in the same metal lockbox I have kept under the workbench since 1981. The workbench David had reorganized. The lockbox he had not found. Ray reviewed everything over 2 visits. The situation was more navigable than I had feared, and more complicated than I had hoped. My will, as written, gave both children significant authority in the event of my incapacitation. The definition of incapacitation was vague. Vague, Ray explained, is how people get moved against their will. We rewrote it. Precisely. with language that required independent medical evaluation by a physician of my choosing, not theirs, before any such determination could be made. We also established a revocable living trust. The house went into the trust. I remained the trustee. The terms were structured so that any transfer of the property required my active written consent, witnessed and notarized, with a mandatory 30-day window during which I could reverse any decision. Ray explained each clause. I understood each clause. I signed with a steady hand. The tremor was there, as it always is, but my signature was mine. What would you have done in my place? If you discovered that the people you raised, the people you built a life to protect, had already decided your life without asking you, what would you have done? Write it in the comments. Just one word. Just yes, if you think you would have done the same thing, because what I did next required everything I had. I let November pass. I let December come. I attended Christmas at David's house as if nothing had changed. I ate the food. I sat in the chair they assigned me near the window. I watched the grandchildren open gifts. Karen asked how I was sleeping. I said fine. David said the house was a lot to manage alone, and that they had been thinking about options. I said I had been thinking too. He smiled. He did not ask what I had been thinking. January arrived cold and hard. David called to say he had arranged for someone to come look at the house. Just for an assessment, Dad, nothing official. I said that was fine. I said I would be there. I called Ray that evening. When the realtor arrived, so did Ray. And Ray had brought something else, a copy of the trust document, the updated will, and a letter from my physician, whom I had visited in December without telling either of my children, confirming my cognitive and physical capacity to make independent legal decisions. The realtor, a young woman who had clearly been briefed by David, came in professional and confident. She left pale and apologetic. David arrived 20 minutes later. He found me sitting in the living room with Ray and the documents laid out on the coffee table, the original coffee table, which I had moved back from the corner where Karen had pushed it. His face went through several things quickly. Surprise, calculation, then something I had not seen from him in years, genuine uncertainty. I did not raise my voice. I did not accuse. I simply explained, calmly and precisely, what the documents contained, that the house was in trust, that no transfer could proceed without my specific, documented, reversible consent, that I had consulted legal counsel, that my capacity had been medically certified, that any further attempts to arrange assessments, meet with realtors, or contact assisted living facilities on my behalf without my knowledge would be treated as a legal matter. Ray sat beside me and said nothing. His presence said everything. David said they were just trying to help. I told him I understood that. I told him I also understood what I had heard through the vent in November. He did not respond to that. Karen called that evening. She was upset, not remorseful, upset. She said I had made things difficult. She said she was only thinking of my safety. I listened to her. Then I said quietly that I had made nothing difficult. I had simply made things accurate. She did not call again for 3 weeks. The pressure built in ways I had anticipated. David stopped by twice more, each time trying a different tone, conciliatory, then firm, then something close to wounded. I was consistent. I was calm. The electrician in me understood. When a fault is traced and isolated, the current stops. You do not need to destroy the system. You simply remove the path. By February, the visits had slowed. By March, they had effectively stopped. I will not pretend that did not carry its own weight. I raised those children. I drove Karen to every debate tournament she ever competed in. I taught David to drive in an empty parking lot on a Sunday morning. I have photographs of them as children that I still cannot look at without feeling the particular ache of time. The silence they left was not nothing. It was real, and it was mine to carry. But there is something I had forgotten during the months of small erasures, something Dorothy used to say when I got frustrated with a difficult job. She would look at me from the kitchen doorway and say, "Walter, you know what the problem is. You always knew. You were just waiting until you were sure." She was right then. She was right now. I knew what the problem was. I had been waiting until I was sure, and now I was sure. I reopened the workshop in April. I had let it sit closed since November, some mix of grief and the feeling that even that space no longer quite belonged to me. I brought back the tools David had taken to his house. He returned them without comment when I asked. I reorganized the workbench the way I had always kept it. I put the voltage tester back where it belonged. I repaired the latch on the gate myself, slowly, with one rest in the middle, because my back required it. The latch held. I planted the garden in May, Dorothy's garden. I do not have her knowledge of plants. I killed 2 tomato seedlings and 1 herb I cannot identify. But I know the shape of the beds, the spacing she used, the way she turned the soil at the edges. I worked in the morning when my back was loosest. I worked in small stretches. The elm tree was full by June, casting shade across the corner where she spent her afternoons. I put a chair there, not the beige ergonomic chair, an old wooden one from the garage, the one I had sat in when I repaired Dorothy's bicycle on summer evenings 30 years ago. I sat in it on a Thursday in late June. My coffee was too strong and too hot, the way she taught me. The garden was imperfect and alive. The porch behind me was solid. The house was mine, secured in language precise enough that no sentiment could override it, and no assumption could dissolve it. My hands rested on the arms of that wooden chair and they trembled, as they always do now. But they were my hands. Everything I could see was built by them, or tended by them, or defended by them. There is a particular kind of loneliness that follows a truth revealed too late, the loneliness of knowing what something was, after you have seen what it became. I live in that loneliness now. Some days it is heavy. Some days it is simply quiet, which is different from empty. I have learned to tell the difference. What I will not do is pretend it was simple or clean. I love my children. I will always love them. That fact and this story exist together, and I have made my peace with the weight of holding both. Love does not override clarity. Clarity does not cancel love. An old man who has buried his wife and defended his home and replanted her garden is allowed to hold complicated things. I have earned that. I am not telling you this story so that you will feel sorry for me. I am telling you this story so that you will understand something I wish I had named earlier. Aging does not revoke your right to make decisions. Trembling hands do not revoke your right to hold the pen. A quiet house does not mean you have agreed to leave it. If you are old, or if you love someone old, if you have ever watched someone being slowly organized out of their own life and wondered whether anyone would notice, whether anything could be done, notice. Something can be done. Sit in the workshop, find the lockbox, call the person who knows the law, sign the document, reclaim the vocabulary of your own existence. And remember, the most dangerous assumption in any system is that the power is off when it isn't. I am Walter Hughes. I am 84 years old. I built this house. I buried my wife beside the elm tree. I sat in the cold with a metal lockbox full of documents, and I traced the fault, and I found it, and I fixed it. My back still aches. My hands still shake. My children do not call. And the porch I poured in 1987 has never cracked. This channel exists for people who refuse to be erased quietly. If that is you, if you have lived something like this, or you are living it right now, leave a comment below. Tell me your story. Tell me what you held on to when everything else was being reorganized around you. Because that thing, whatever it is what you are made of, and it is worth defending.